The Gemara in Arachin ends up by asking, well, based on what you just told us, on Purim we should be saying Hallel because there was a Ness. And then it goes on to explain, no, we don't, because there was a Ness in Chutz La'aretz and it wasn't really a Ness that changed the course of Jewish history, etc. Just one moment. And therefore, we don't say Hallel on Purim. But we have to ask ourselves, what Ness is it referring to? What Ness took place on Purim? What supernatural event took place on Purim? There were no Nisim in the supernatural sense during the events of Purim. If we all know that even the name of Hashem doesn't appear in Megillat Esther, correct? Whatever happened, all the events can be understood and seen as an interesting juxtaposition of coincidental events, but they're all events within the natural course of and way of the world. In other words, there's an emperor. He's obviously a very unsavory character, and he needs a new wife, and he has a beauty pageant arranged with all these bethuloth, and eventually chooses a new wife, etc., etc. And it happens to be Esther, and Mordechai happens to be her uncle, and then there happens to be Haman in the picture, and Mordechai overhears some information, and we all know the story, and it all leads inexorably to the result that Mordechai and Esther are able to undo the plans of Haman. But it's all within the natural way of the world. There's nothing supernatural. So what's the Ness being referred to here by the Gemara? So therefore, and with this I wish to end, we are forced to understand that the true Jewish understanding of the term Ness, what the Gemara here says in Aramaic, Nisa, is not the word or the translation in English, miracle, is not an accurate translation. I know there are a couple of questions. Let me just finish this thought, and then we'll take a few questions. That is not a correct understanding of the term Ness. In English, miracle means something supernatural, but the word Ness does not mean that in Hebrew necessarily at all. Very often, Ness refers to some outstanding, unusual event, something that we would not expect to happen. It would not be the normal outcome, but it's not supernatural. And this connects also to the essential, the more primal meaning of the word Ness. The shoresh Ness, nun samach in Hebrew, initially does not mean a miracle. What does it mean? A banner, a flag, right? It says in the pasuk in Tehillim, "Nathatha l'ri'echa nes lehithmoses," which means you have done something which is like a banner for all your followers to look at. In other words, when we know on a battlefield you have soldiers, for example, fighting one army against another. So there's always someone who's holding the banner, the flag of the king, or what have you, which is the rallying point, or to show that the king is still alive and still fighting, and fight on and don't give up. The Ness is something that you see from afar, from a distance, from a long way away. It's something that you can look up to, and it encourages you perhaps, and it's something that you take note of because it stands up, it's higher than the surrounding objects around it, so it's visible, correct? It stands out, it sticks out. A Ness is something which sticks out because it's unusual, it's special. The events of Purim are special because that kind of progression of events, even though they're all explicable within using the terms and the frames of reference of the Persian Empire and how things worked at that time, one can explain each of those events as they occurred in just entirely natural and down-to-earth way. The fact that these events took place in this order, one followed on the heels of the next, leading to a certain unexpected result, that is something that is in all entirely correct to say this is a Ness, this is something special. This is something that Hashem brought about, because it would be hard to believe that such a result would be the final product from such a situation. In the same way, we can say with complete justification that, for instance, Milchemet Sheshet Hayamim was a Ness. There were no supernatural events of which I am aware, but it was a miraculous, outstanding, and unexpected victory in the speed with which it took place, and how complete it was, etc., etc. And that's exactly what the Gemara is saying. That a Ness is not necessarily something. When it says Purim there was a Ness, so why don't we say Hallel? It's telling you exactly this. a Ness is not necessarily something which is supernatural. You don't have to expect or demand from Hashem supernatural events in order to understand that Hashem is behind these events, and in order to thank Hashem for those events. And we don't actually have to base our understanding and appreciation of and our celebration of Hanukkah on supernatural events either. And if you ask me personally, do I think there was a Ness Pach Hashemin at the time of Hanukkah? In all honesty, I would tell you I think almost certainly there was not. Why do I say that? Not because I don't think Hashem can cause such an event to occur. Of course Hashem could bring the entire universe into existence from absolutely nothing, which is both what the Torah tells us, and it also happens to be what science tells us today. They just call it something else. They call it the Big Bang, and they just explain that roughly 14 billion years ago, and there's always, a couple of 100 million years one way or the other, no one's quite sure about, there was nothing, and all of a sudden there was something, which is a very interesting phenomenon, because that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And that's basically what the Torah tells us. Bereshith bara Elohim et hashamayim et haaretz. Hashem can do anything. He can bring the universe into existence. He can create all matter and energy in an instant. He can certainly cause a small amount of oil to burn a few days extra until you can get your act together and produce some shemen tahor. That's really not a big deal. And again, it's not something to say halal about. It's not something even to get very excited about. We find in the Gemara in Masechet Ta'anith that a certain Chacham said to his daughter, who said, "We haven't got oil to light Shabbat candles." They were very poor. He said, "Well, take vinegar and light that, because he who said to oil that it should burn can also say to vinegar that it should burn." In other words, Hashem can do any such thing, of course. So if I say I don't think it happened, it's not because I don't believe such a thing. It could happen. Of course it could happen. But if I see that in Ala Nisim it's not mentioned, I ask myself, I think, a very reasonable question. Why is it not mentioned? If such a thing happened, and it was something was known, it was factual, it was real, and everyone knew it was so, why would it not be mentioned? Number one. Number two, in Sefer Maccabim Aleph, written by a Jew who was a witness to the events. Apparently he was a soldier in the army of Yudah Maccabi. That's what we understand. Doesn't mention such a thing. In fact, in Sefer Maccabim, it gives another explanation why Hanukkah was made to be 8 days in length. And with this, really, I will end. The reason given there in Sefer Maccabim Aleph is that during the campaign, they were fighting the Greeks for a number of years, approximately 3.5 years. And of course, just before Hanukkah, you have Sukkot. A couple of months before Hanukkah, you have Sukkot. The final breakthrough took place just before Hanukkah. During Sukkot, they were still, as it says in Sefer Maccabim, they were living like wild animals. The Jews, our forefathers, who were fighting the Greeks and their Jewish supporters to fight for their ability to live in Eretz Yisrael as Jews. They couldn't live in their cities and their homes. They had to flee their homes and their land. They had to live in caves like wild animals. That's what it says in Sefer Maccabim. It says they were living like Hayot Hasadeh in Ma'aroth. If you go to Beth Guvrin, you can see the Ma'aroth which they dug out of the living rock to hide in. They were hiding. There was a guerrilla war. They lived from hand to mouth. You can imagine the suffering and the Mesilut Nefesh, etc. involved. Something quite amazing. And therefore they were not able to celebrate the Chag of Sukkot for 8 days. And it says in Sefer Maccabim Aleph, therefore we celebrate Hanukkah, which begins on Kaf Hei B'Chislev, which was the first day of the Hanukkah, of the reinstitution of the Avodah and the Mikdash. We celebrated for 8 days in order to make up for the 8 days of Sukkot that we were not able to celebrate and observe properly. So it says in Sefer Maccabim Aleph, written by people who were there at the time. Now if the reason for the 8 days was Ness Pach Hashem, why didn't they mention that? Wouldn't that be at least something to mention in passing? So for these reasons, and because of all the other explanations we find in Megillat Ta'anith, in the Perush of Megillat Ta'anith, which don't mention it, my feeling and my inclination is to say that it didn't happen at all, and that to me makes no difference. In fact, it's not important. It doesn't have anything. It doesn't mean anything significant or has no great meaning in my eyes, whether there was such a thing or not. The important thing is the the fact that the Jewish people were willing to lay down their lives in order to be able to live in Eretz Yisrael as Jews, because as I said before, the only option left to them by the Goyim and their Jewish supporters was to either live as Greeks, as Goyim, or die as Jews. There was no third option. The Jews were willing to lay their lives, the lives of their families, their parnassah, everything on the line, and fight a guerrilla war for years, for a number of years, against a very powerful enemy, and eventually they were victorious. And we see in this the Yad Hashem, without a doubt. And they were thus saved from the terrible persecutions and situation in which they found themselves, which the Rambam described so eloquently before, as we read, that their money, their daughters, their homes, everything was being taken from them, and they were being downtrodden and beaten into they were ridden over roughshod. All this was turned around, and they were able to establish their own independent sovereign government in Eretz Yisrael, and they were able to reinstitute the Avodah and the Mikdash, which is the centerpiece of Jewish existence in Eretz Yisrael. If those aren't sufficient reasons to celebrate for 8 days and say Hallel and say Nisim, and to celebrate the Hanukkah of the Mizbeach and of the Mikdash by lighting candles, which was, as we read in Megillat Ta'anit, which was the first act that they were able to perform, if those aren't sufficient reasons, and I really do not know what would be a sufficient reason. So you can either choose to accept the claim that there was a Ness Pachashemen, or you can choose to believe, in my view, that there was not. Either way, it's not the essential and really meaningful aspect of Hanukkah. And that's something that I think we should internalize and teach our children.
The production of these videos and maintaining this channel demands much time and money. If you enjoyed this video, please show your appreciation and support. To make a donation, please go to www.machonshilo.org and press the PayPal button, which appears on the upper right-hand side of the home page. To sponsor a video or purchase Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael, please write us at office@machonshilo.org.